Mike, man, I'd love to hear, more about your testimony. How did you grow up? How did you come to know the Father? Where are you now? That kind of stuff, man.
Yeah, that's just amazing. Right back at you, man. Like I said, we've known each other for over 20 years, and we've seen ups and downs, and we've tested the word together. And it's just amazing to see that the Father finally has us here. And so before I get my testimony, when Dan was talking about who this channel is for, I hope it was for me 10 years ago. I hope the person who I was 10 years ago, who's searching for deeper topics, that this can help that person. And so it's just amazing that Father has given us the opportunity to do that. And like Dan said, we just humbly say that we don't know anything. We don't know everything. We will definitely study and give you our best portion, but there's plenty of other meat out there. But we just want to be that gateway and to be there along the way to help you out. And so a little bit about me. I did not grow up in church per se. I came from like a watered down Catholic background. And so my family, they did the holidays, and, they were labeled Catholic, but they didn't really, they weren't hardcore practicing Catholics. I left shortly after communion. And when I say I left, I was like 8 or 9, but basically my family left. And so that's basically when I left the church model in the building. And so I was pretty much agnostic for 20 years. I was never an atheist, did never hate God, would never try to debate Christians and I was my own God. I was into the world, and I loved everything Babylon had to offer. And when I say Babylon, I just mean, the shiny lights that keep you, looking upon them instead of the God. And
as all the world has to offer, the shiny thing, the cars,
And so I was there. I was easily scooped up into that. Wanted to be rich, I was an entrepreneur, wanted to be financial independent. I love the show Entourage, wanted to, basically copy that. And then I think God had other plans for me. So basically, as I was living my life, not caring the world as far as serving God, I got a DUI. And so it eventually got dropped, but I got the DUI, and definitely
and what year did you get the DUI?
That was like an 09-ish, but, it definitely, Father used it. And so definitely not making light of it. Definitely do not drink and drive. I was barely over the legal limit, but I got the max put on me. And I think obviously I didn't like it at the beginning. I didn't like it when I was going through it. But then looking back, when you get into this walk and you realize he chastises his sons, he refines them, he makes them stronger. And that's definitely what I think God did with me. And so I didn't grow up in church. Didn't start in Matthew or John or Paul's letters. I started in Genesis, and it didn't.
How did you know at that point? You didn't really grow up in the church. How did you know? What made you turn to Scripture at that like post DUI moment in your life?
Sure, because he reaches you at your humblest, and I didn't know any other way, right? So I don't know. I think it was just him. I did have to go to AA meetings, and like 10 of them, and counseling and all that. And maybe that was kind of, I just didn't, played a role, but I didn't know. And so that's a great question. But yeah, I think just opening up his word and see if that was the answer. And so, it didn't take long, but I started in Genesis and I got to the flood narrative. And so, I actually got that DUI on the 17th day of the 7th month. And if you know about the flood, that's when the waters receded and, everything was calm again. And so that really hit me. And I felt the Father speaking to me. And I always share that as part of my testimony, that no matter what calendar we're on and whatever, it definitely wasn't July 17th, but in this Gregorian calendar, it is. And so Father reached, he hit me where, he used that, and I was there. And he found me where I was at that time, and it just stuck with me. And I always, try to say that during my testimony. And so even before the DUI, I was getting into conspiracies, and, Dan and I always talk about being fishers of men and not only using one lure. I think he mentioned John 3:16 earlier, and that wouldn't have worked with me. And so, but there were other lures.
You had heard that before. You had heard Jesus came, died on the cross for your sins. You're a sinner. And aren't you excited about that news? Like you heard that already.
I've heard about it, and I used to watch wrestling, and there was a guy who had a shirt that said that, and I was like, "What is this?" But it didn't really click. It sounded good, but it didn't really do it for me. And so I think the Father used truth and my truth seeking to actually find Him and His Son. And so
and that's what different avenue, like a different lure. That's what you mean by lures, like. Not every fish is interested in shrimp. Some like bread, some like, whatever. But for you, like for some people, shrimp is great to get the conversation going about the gospel and who Christ is, all that fun stuff. But for others, they're interested in a different avenue. And for you, you were seeking truth. You knew, I'm guessing, you knew by seeking the truth that there was evil out there. You get into the conspiracies, you can see that the devil's at work. And so I imagine you probably, at some point, logically thought, well, if the devil's at work, there's got to be a God at work too on the other side, right? That's
exactly what happened. Exactly. So yeah, I got into conspiracies, went down the black rabbit hole. Anything world governments, how the two-party system is crazy, and all the different conspiracies, the different the bloodline families and Illuminati and all that, the mystery religions, all that kind of stuff. And so I got into that. I was always into that at a young age. So 2008 would have been mid-20s. And
still puppies.
Still puppies. Thought I knew everything, but didn't. And so, but like Dan said, that was very fear-based. And it took a solid, let's see, probably 8-7 years to finally get out of that. And like I said, I'm not bashing that, but that's what Father used to get me to see Him. And so I got into certain teachers online, like Rob Skiba was one. He's big into the Nephilim. That was definitely a side topic I started researching. He had a show called Virtual House Church. Got into that as well. But basically, like Dan said, I was so deep into the negative that I was searching for that true light. And I was only online. I was saved on YouTube, I guess you would say. And so I was finally able, to get out of that a little bit and kind of look for that fellowship. And so
did you find community in that process? Is that where, because I know you'd mentioned before, I'm kind of cheating because I know your testimony some, but you had found like an underground church in the Tampa Bay area. Is that kind of around that time frame where you started to connect with that community?
Correct. Yeah. So I was, just online only, very lone wolf kind, and I was searching that community. And so I went on a Meetup app and typed in Bible study, and just so happened to be one called Beer and Bible. And I was like, oh, okay. Relaxed setting. I wasn't ready to step into a church to sign any papers and become a member or anything like that. But so there was this place called Tampa Underground. I highly, I would want you guys to actually search that out. They have a great documentary, about 30 minutes. And the gist of it is they believe in the Acts 2 church model, where they believe in little house churches, and where each little house church has its own ministry. So some are feeding the poor. Some actually go to strip clubs and try to witness to the ladies there outside. Some are doing foster care. Mine was just Beer and Bible. And it was the perfect lure for me, because I was not looking for the strict,
can't have a beer,
have to shave your beard.
Right.
So this was the perfect one. And so I started going there, and all we would do is we'd have one beer and we'd just talk and read probably like a chapter in Luke, for example. And so we would just discuss it, and we'd tried to go as deep as we knew, and we would get to know each other. We would see each other on different days. They had actually had a Sunday service, so we would go there and meet. And what I came to find was, at this time, I did not know that they had 300 other micro churches. And so, but I came to find out that this was just one of many, and I was part of this community, and I had no idea. And so I started seeing all these other ministry opportunities and helping the poor, and
wow, that's cool.
Moving like single moms that needed help, and it was just amazing to see.
Yeah, you're seeing a church actually in the community doing something, put their hand to the plow, more than just asking for tithing money or whatever your experience might have been in the church, or, you know, what you heard about the church, that kind of thing. They were actually making a difference in the community.
Correct. So I think we met up on Tuesdays. And so when we were reading about Jesus, and then I would see that they were actually doing that. What a coincidence, right? And actually doing what Jesus tell you to do. And it was just amazing to see. And so that was the next step in my, you know, that was my first initial taste of kind of what the church or ecclesia is. As I said, I mentioned that I got into Rob Skiba a little bit. So he was definitely conspiracy. But he also had this thing called virtual house church. And basically the virtual house church is, you know, it actually goes with Tampa Underground. It's the house church model. And basically it was virtually. And basically what he would do is, I guess you would call it Torah pursuant. And they would read the Torah portion. And so basically you would take 5 or so chapters in the Old Testament, like 2 or 3 in the prophets, and then they would link it with passages in the New Testament. And it just totally made sense to me. It clicked. Like I said, I didn't grow up in church. So for me, it's like, to me, looking from a logical point of view, it's one big book. And so I think he connected a lot of dots. But, you know, as you get into that kind of walk, you kind of become very prideful. And so I was looking at Tampa Underground. I'm like, why aren't you guys doing this? Why aren't you doing this? Not knowing that they were doing it. They were actually living it out. And so it's been my passion to kind of combine the two, kind of combine the, you know, the honoring, the loving the Father, and then loving your neighbor part. And so I think both, and it just so happens that they're Acts 2, which is amazing. We might be able to talk more about that, but combining both of that and actually living it out. And so that's been my passion, is combining the two. The Torah crowd, you know, they honor the Father on Sabbath. They go to these fellowships and they do the feast and eat clean. And then, you know, it appears these Tampa Underground people are doing it the other 6 days. And so it's my mission to kind of combine the two ways of thinking and loving your Father and loving your neighbor. I think it's amazing. And I think that's what we're called to do.
Yeah, that's really good, man. And I've had very similar experience, I think, as you too. And, you know, you kind of you're the one that introduced me to we're saying the word Torah Observant. Can you explain a little bit about, like, what do you mean by Torah Observant?
Sure.
Or that you would do Torah? What does that mean?
Sure. Nobody keeps the Torah perfectly, right? That's what we need Jesus. But basically, for lack of a better word, we're just trying to do what Jesus actually did. So Jesus was a Jew and he kept the Torah. So basically, I would claim that it's no different than what the standard church does, except they keep Saturday Sabbath as we know it. They eat a cleaner diet. They do the festival. So there's 7 feasts. For example, Sukkot. So I would do that as well. And just stuff like that. And so that's how I would differentiate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, man. And I grew up a little bit different. And I'm sure we'll pick up where you left off, but just to kind of give a little bit of a foundation of how I came to know God. I grew up very traditional American Western 1980s, 1990s, Billy Graham, Reformed theology, Calvinistic. I grew up in a PCA church, Presbyterian of America, I believe is what it stands for. And so people joke and call Presbyterians the frozen chosen. So I have very early memories in the church. I mean, I remember maybe 4 or 5 years old helping my mom in the nursery watch babies. You know, she would volunteer in the kids space, or me at 6, 7 years old coloring pictures of Jesus. Like I grew up very much so aware of it and around the faith. And I would say around 5 years old, my grandmother on my father's side rather, would tell you that I surrendered my life to Jesus when I was 5. Back then, we would have used the terminology, I accepted Jesus into my heart, except I didn't talk like that. My parents are from the Northeast. I grew up in Tampa. I just like to do that accent periodically for fun. But so I would say right then, God like pursued me right then and there. I think it was way beyond, it was way before I had a mature enough brain to even really know what I was trying to grasp onto. But I believe God started to work then. And then as I got older, man, by the time I got to middle school, I was hanging out with another one of our best friends that he didn't grow up in the church. So I grew up in a strict house where you couldn't have parental advisory CDs. You couldn't listen to CDs with bad words on it. And so my mom would drive me to Walmart because it was the only store that sold the clean CDs, so the ones that didn't have parental advisory. And she'd buy me like a Bone Thugs and Harmony album or NWA or Outkast or Biggie Smalls, as if just because you took out the F word, all the rest of the content was still probably not appropriate. But
so when you said, no, just kind of compare, because it was kind of like a segue between Torah and your upbringing, would you say the PCA had their own laws? Like, how would you
yeah.
You said strict. So do you want to talk more about that?
For sure. Yeah. So by strict, I mean like they held to certain confessions. There was certain church structure. Like you had to be, if you're a pastor there, you had to be part of the presbytery. They held on to some hard stances like Calvinism, for example. I'm not anti-Calvinistic, but it was very dogmatic in that. And so basically what it produced for me to discover as I got older was what I call hyper grace, which is basically you're once saved already, you're always saved. You bring nothing to the table, you do nothing, Jesus did the whole thing. And like, while that might sound like good news, and I would say it is good news, it just produced in me this like, there's really no point of doing anything. I'm already saved. I'm getting out of hell for free. And that's the route I went. Despite the fact that I know God walked with me the whole time, that's the life that I chose, and so
you were getting into your teen years, and that's probably why you rebelled, right? Because you grew up in it, where I didn't. I kind of was agnostic my whole life, and I was looking for that structure. Before you continue that, I just wanted to say that during my conspiracy route, I think it played a role. And so I got into the kind of like libertarianism and non-aggression principle and anarcho-capitalists. And I realized, getting into this Torah walk, that Father has his own kingdom, has his own constitution, how he's loving to others, how he doesn't like aggression towards others. And that's so for me, it clicked perfectly. And so as Dan says, he kind of grew up in an adding to law to where they were very strict, and then he rebelled. For me, it was kind of, I was more, now I wouldn't say grace because I didn't even know what it is, but I was free to roam how I wanted to. And then I like philosophically got into a more structured system that seemed legit. And then I realized that God had his own. And so it's beautiful when you connect the dots. And I just wanted to say that, and how we both kind of came at it at two different ways here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was different. Some similarities for sure. There's some overlap, but for the most part, yeah, man, like, and you're spot on with God has his own rules. He has his own kingdom, and a kingdom has a king, and the king has commandments and instructions and a way in which the king demands for a kingdom to run. He's not, it's very different than what we're used to with presidents and a democracy and a republic. It's ran very much differently.
And it's perfect.
It is perfect. Absolutely. It's eternal. And so, yeah, man, as I continue to get older, I rebelled, to keep a long story short. But by the time I hit late 20s, you and I actually, ironically, were living together. We're on the north side of Atlanta and Roswell. And man, it was a low point in my life. I was broken up with my girlfriend at the time. I had a 3-year-old daughter.
But it was supposed to be that way, I think. I think I was supposed to be there at that time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I'm thankful that you were. Man. And I just remember going into the closet in my room there at one point and just going, all right, God. And I think I actually, for what this is worth, I think I cried out to the name Jehovah. I think that was the name that I called him on.
I know why, but yes.
And man, from there he started to really, I believe that was the moment that what we would call surrendered to Jesus Christ. I think that he was my Lord and Savior up until that point, sure, and we can discuss that. I'm sure we'll get into that more than one time in our talks, but that was the point where I surrendered. But then I really didn't know what that actually meant. I started with basics, what Paul might call spiritual milk. I just opened up the Bible. I didn't even really understand what I was reading. I would just force myself, even though my circumstances didn't make me feel like I wanted to read the Bible. I would discipline myself to do it.
And we read it together, and we went to church Sundays.
That's right.
We tried to get our families to go. It was pretty cool.
That's right.
That's right. We didn't stay there, but it was pretty cool. Good start.
Absolutely. But man, that's a really good point about that church that we went to on the north side of Atlanta. And kind of part of why I think Bromalogy is important, because there's conversations out there right now that a term is being used that you can unhinge the New Testament from the Old Testament. That, in other words, just believing that Jesus crucified and resurrected is enough, and the authority of the text doesn't really matter. And man, I just think that's such a dangerous place to be as a church. And so we experienced some of that at that church. And I remember you and I sitting down, and our spirits knew that there was something off, that it just, something wasn't quite right about where we were. But our hearts were to pursue Christ. We were starving and we didn't even know it.
Absolutely.
Like, give me a drop of milk, even if it's barely. And so, and I was with you at that time too, with the conspiracy stuff, man. I mean, I wasn't afraid to learn anything about anything. And so anyways, man, we kind of walked through that together. So what was your experience at that church? Like, how would you describe our experience there?
Oh man. I've come a long way since that church, but I do remember, like you said, our spirit was kind of questioning things, but we still went there, and we tried to get our other roommate to go, and he did a few times, and we were still trying to work. We knew that was at least a place that he can start, our friend could start. And so I do remember that. And obviously we didn't stay there that long, but I think combined, that was a good foundation for us. We saw some of the good, we definitely saw some of the bad, but we also used it to kind of bring other people into the kingdom. And I hope that Bromalogy can do that as well.
Yeah, man. So, so it started off good. My story, my testimony, to kind of put a button on it, started off good. I think God pursued me right out of the gate, and then it went bad. I kind of just decided to do my own thing and live my own way. And then I feel like it went good again.
Prodigal son.
I surrendered, and God started to do a work in me. But the work that was in front of me, I could have never imagined what he was getting ready to walk me through. From getting married to my girlfriend, my now wife, buying my own home, getting started on a career, all the way to pursuing Freemasonry, which seems odd to be, it seems like an odd place for Freemasonry to pop up into a testimony, but it did for me.
You went there.
God wanted me to go there. I wanted to go there, and he was willing to walk in it with me. And so all the way to leaving that, turning from that to working at full-time ministry vocationally, going to seminary, and recently finishing at an Acts 29 seminary, and working full-time in ministry, which has been awesome. Man, it's new, but it's been awesome. And so that's where I currently am now. So that's why I say my current understanding. Where are you now, man? I know you'd said you were going to, you were at the church in Tampa.
Correct.
We were in Atlanta, probably, 2010, 2011. And then around 2012, I think you'd moved back to Tampa.
Yes.
What happened from there?
So the whole Tampa Underground, that was probably 15, 16. I was still back in the world, it is what it is. I was prodigal son too. But around 2014, this will be a good testimony here. I got humbled multiple times. I think 2009 was it too. Yeah, it was 2009 during the DUI issue. And then 2014, both times I had no work, and I was down to $300, like literally $300 to my name both times. And so as someone who loved what Babylon offered, wanted to be financially wealthy, and found
yourself pretty much on the other end,
to have $300 to my name twice, because I didn't learn my lesson the first time, apparently. That's what Father used. And so, but it was amazing. It was amazing testimony. I read the Bible in 3 months in 2014, literally the whole Bible in 3 months. 2014. Cool. I was reading 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day. It was truly remarkable. And it was just miracles. I would get checks in the mail, like rebates. My grandmother would give me a bond. She had no idea I was out of work to pay rent. I was using my credit card. I was running up my credit card. But I felt the Father, and I was so humbled, in tears some days. And I felt the Father telling me to, for lack of a better word, tithe and give, even though I had nothing to give. And so part of racking up my credit card was giving. And so that really shaped me. And so after that, like after that time with the Father for literally 7 months, I got a new job, started working again, more money than I made previously. But then within that year, I got a certification and tripled my salary. I moved to a different state and tripled my salary all within a year and a half.
Wow.
Like I don't say that for boasting. It's just, it's amazing.
Well, you're boasting in the Lord, you know, you're not trying to boast in yourself, but yeah, you're boasting in what God did for you.
It's amazing. And it's not about money. Like so basically what I'm getting at is the spiritual gifts, we'll talk about that. We love talking about the fruits of the Spirit. Spiritual gifts is giving. And I think that's definitely one of my gifts, but I had to work on that. I had to work on that. I wanted the financial freedom for myself. And now, you know, he's blessing me to be able to bless others. And that was just a pivotal moment in my life. And I try my best to continue to do that and be that gifter.
Yeah, you a married man?
But as far as current life, yes. So now let's go a little bit later. Hopped around to a few cities, doing some consulting work, went back to Tampa right before the C word, you know, the big COVID. And I started going to a local Sabbath group. And so I would meet on Saturdays and I actually met my wife there. And so we got married 2021, September, and we are currently in the Ozarks area. And so just to finish off, I guess, and then I'll hand it back off to Dan, is that milk and meat is very important to Dan and I. We've been there. We've been in meat or milk. We've took a bath in it. But we were always searching for more. And I just pray that what we could provide with Bromalogy if I can make a YouTube channel for someone where I was 10 years ago, that's my goal. That's my personal goal. And the more I've researched, the more I realize fruits of the Spirit is the meat. And it's obviously these other ideas we're going to hash out, but it's how you present them. You know, it's easy to get, and anybody can take a day off. Anybody can go to church on Sunday, right? But can you forgive? Can you forgive and love your neighbor and take care of them and serve? And so I'll just end it there. That is my meat. My meat is the fruits of the Spirit, and I hope to convey that.
Yeah, that's good, man. And it's in line. It's in the framework of, you know, what Paul was rebuking the church of Corinth for. They were not displaying the fruits of the Spirit because they had not moved on to solid food, to the Broma, and so
they were jealous and causing division, causing strife. And I see that all within the body, and it's pretty sad.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, you know, like you alluded to, we're not really trying to pit like milk versus meat. That's not the goal. Nope. You know, the goal is not like get off the milk, it's terrible, leave it, abandon it. I think there's always a place for milk, for Bible basics. I think I know I have to often remind myself of Bible basics on a daily basis. Sometimes I need to tell myself or remind myself that God does love me. That's a very basic truth, but you know, I don't think it's something we want to just move on from. And so this isn't trying to pit one against the other, but it is saying, okay, I know that God loves me. I know that, and I want to know how to love him more.
Exactly.
And I want to be closer with him. I want a better relationship with him. And so that's kind of the heart, you know, that we're coming at this. And so